everyone, and welcome to the Ion Canon podcast, your home for in-depth discussion on the lore, still the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew, and I am coming to you from Underworld North Studio in Toronto. And as always, I'm joined across the continent by your friend of mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing good. My audio had like a 5 second thing, so like your voice sped up and like just like started like that for like 5 seconds. It was hilarious.
That's all right. I tend to talk pretty quickly anyway, so I keep going.
No. I just found it funny. Like it's like my audio was trying to catch up to you, so like it sped you up, like if it puts you on fast forward. Hilarious.
Nice. That's funny. That works. Are things good now? How's the audio now? Everything synced up?
Oh yeah, everything's synced
okay,
up.
Good. Speaking of synced up, that's not a segue at all. Doesn't make sense. The Death Star, the ultimate power in the galaxy, or is it insignificant next to the power of the Force? Maybe it's just a small moon. Who knows? This week, we continue the Andor momentum train with a look at the fearsome superweapon that started it all and what it symbolizes in the mythology of Star Wars. It's going to be a great Ion Canon deep dive conversation. Oh, sorry. Let's get the plugs out of the way. I definitely did take my decaf, I promise. Get the plugs out of the way. You can follow us mostly on Blue Sky at Ion Canon. Blue Sky. We're still on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, but follow us on Blue Sky. Go to Blue Sky. It's the best place to follow us. Also, if audio is more your speed, we will have this episode up on Spotify and Apple Podcasts right after we're done recording. So please do look up Ion Canon podcast, not Ion Canon, just Ion Canon podcast for the feed. I don't know how far back that goes to when I started putting them up again. There's a good chunk of them now, so if you want to go back and listen to previous episodes as well, they are there on Spotify and Apple, and I think some other podcatchers, etc. Also, as you can see here, we are proudly part of the Star Wars Underworld Podcast Network. And here on the Underworld YouTube channel, we have memberships. You have channel memberships. We have super chats. So if you chat with us normally, comment down below. We'll get to it as soon as we can. But if you super chat us, I'll interrupt myself mid-sentence. I'll interrupt Joel mid-sentence. You'll get to your comment. It'll be great. There we go. Also, the Discord server down in the description below. Get a minty fresh link into the Discord server. We are grateful for all your time, your presence, your company, and your support you can provide. The Discord server is free of charge, of course, where we got all sorts of conversations going on about Star Wars, about canon, talking at the end of the High Republic, talking about other things. Probably going to be talking about the films that come out, the Marvel film, the Superman film, the DC film, Fantastic Four and Superman coming out at the end of the month. At the end of the month, next month. Sorry. Also talking about, it's almost the end of the month. Almost the end of the month. Also, Jurassic World 3D. It's gonna be good. There we go. That's coming out in a few weeks too. So chatting all about that nerdy stuff. We get nerdy there, and we got some events happening recently. Anything happening coming up?
Nothing announced. I haven't decided yet if I want to do game night or movie night. Last week we did a game night. We played some Smash Bros. We played some Fortnite. The week before that we watched Spaceballs. That was fun. Nice. So yeah, I haven't really decided yet, but we will see soon.
There we go. Yeah, definitely a fun time. You and Ben, when did you guys actually start this, making it really a comedy community? Gotta be like 2023, 2022.
Oh, it was like a year, or it's definitely been more than a year at this point, I think.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
And I've tried, because I've learned from other people's Discord, to try to have regular events.
Yeah.
And we've done pretty good. I'm surprised how well we've done doing weekly events.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, when it came out of COVID, and there we go. So anyway, yeah, do check that out down below. The Tractor Beam Comics Reviews, gonna mention that quickly here. Usually Chris Abbott and I, on Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, right here on the Underworld YouTube channel, we're usually reviewing the comics that came out this week. There's a good one. It's Legacy of Vader #5. We're pushing that 2 weeks, so Joel can come on and do 5 and 6, and we're taking a break and just doing, taking it easy. I'm gonna go to the soccer game is what I'm gonna do. But taking that break, and then we'll be back with the Tractor Beam Comics reviews the following week. Of course, if you want to listen to our previous episodes, that's also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Tractor Beam Comics reviews. Check that out. Last but not least, a bit of a plug. I didn't put it on the bottom there, but I'm wearing this T-shirt. This is our buddy Din from F105, and he is putting on Resistance Fest. If you are in the Toronto area, or want to come to the Toronto area, you can check out Resistance Fest. I'll make sure on the Spotify and Apple. When this is done, I'll put the link in the description as well. Check that out. That is the Horseshoe Tavern on Queen Street West, this Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. All very Canadian focused bands, and just celebrating Canadian music and saying, sorry, we don't want to be the 51st state. We're happy being our 10 provinces and 3 territories. If California wants to be the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th province, I'm sure you'd be happy with that, Joel.
You don't want California.
You don't want California. We want parts of Brooklyn. I don't know. Anyway,
for the British Empire, all hail Charles.
Yes, there we go. Anyway, so come out and enjoy. The headliner, the Mahones, is a classic Irish Canadian punk band, and Din of F105 is playing, a whole bunch of other artists, and Ash, our friend Ash, is moderating, doing a monologue. It's gonna be this kind of Star Wars rock mashup going on, so please do check that out at Horseshoe Tavern, Queen Street West, this Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. I will put the link in the description when I get a chance after we record. I should have put it in before, but that's okay. We'll figure that out, and also we'll share it on our Iron Canon socials very shortly. There we go. So looking forward to that one. All right, I've done a bunch of talking. What do you got this week, Joel?
I read a book.
You read a book?
Yeah, it's called Trials of the Jedi by Charles Soule. I finished it this week.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think I've heard of him. Charles Soule. I think I've heard of him.
Very good. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Your review.
No, I did it. I have now officially completed the High Republic. What a ride.
Yeah.
But Matthew hasn't, so I'm going to try to be as non-spoilery as possible.
You better.
Yep. Okay, let's see. I'm going to try to think. Okay. So, sorry if you hear birds tweets, by the way. Birds are tweeting up a storm outside.
Just get your cat to take care of them. I'm just kidding.
So, I guess the first thing, love the pacing. Very well paced, I found. Maybe I just read it better than last time when I did Light of the Jedi, but I really enjoyed the pacing, and I did not feel lost as I did with Light of the Jedi. So that was an improvement. I understood most of what was going on. There was only 1 or 2 characters I had no idea who they were. Also probably helped that I read both the young adult novels beforehand, which I think you should read before, at the very least before you read this one.
Oh, bless you. Medical emergency. No, not quite. Just allergies.
Yeah, allergies. Which you probably should read before this one.
Yeah.
But outside of that, very, very good. Very excited. I got through this pretty quick. I think it took about a week to listen to on Audible. Very fun listening to on Audible, by the way. I even think there's some original music in there, which I've never heard any Star Wars track. I could be wrong. I'm not quite sure, but there are definitely some moments that feel like this feels like original music. So there's all that. Of course, Mark Thompson does the voices. Very good.
Mark the Canon Legend Thompson.
Oh yeah, so I get to hear his Marchion Roy voice one more time.
Oh, yeah.
And let's see, what else could I not spoil? I'll just say I understand why they're calling this the end of the beginning and not the beginning of the end.
Interesting. All right.
I think that's as good as I can get.
Yeah, I'm about 7 chapters in. I mean, I had to finish Valiant Vow. It's really good to hear. I mean, yeah, I'm reading it a faster clip for me. I'm enjoying it definitely. I'm hearing Mark Thompson's Markian in my head, which is a testament to how strong and distinctive he made it in the Kevin Scott audio drama.
Well, I've been used to it for so long at this
Yeah.
point because I listen to all the adult books.
That's true. And it's good to know that you could really follow it well, just especially having not read the comics as much, and just you have a sense of what's going on. But yeah, so that's good. From what I can tell, that was the big question. From everything I've seen, all the positive reviews, and how quickly. Dom finished it in a week, unless in a few days. Chris Abbott finished it in a few days. From what I can tell from all the positive reviews, the real question was, are they going to stick the landing? And it seems like they have. That's. I'll be my own judge here, but that they've really done it and really made this achievement. And when I'm done reading, I'll break out the superlatives, because it sounds like it's worth the superlatives of Trials of the Jedi and of the High Republic Initiative as a whole. So, because that's the question, because we know DJO is going to stick the landing on HRA. We know Kevin's going to stick the landing on that one shot that's coming out in July. Charles, he's a great storyteller. He's a great writer. Some of the Dark Droids, some things were a bit shaky. Undiscovered Country, I don't know, but apparently Trials of the Jedi, he really pulls it all together and really focused all his energy and attention on that. So yeah, that it's really heartening to see that this incredibly ambitious project, that easily the most ambitious thing that Lucasfilm Publishing has ever done by a mile. It's not an exaggeration. In the 50 years of Lucasfilm Publishing or whatever, no more than 50 years, 52 years. Well, I can't do math. Since what was that novel that came out after A New Hope?
Splinter of the Mind's Eye?
Yeah, Splinter of the Mind's Eye. If we start that at the beginning in the Marvel comic, until now, easily the most ambitious thing. And it seems like they've really done it. So
I'm very curious to
I broke it one superlative.
For you to get to the ending. I'll just say that.
Yeah, so now I'm really looking forward to all of it. Yeah, so yeah, I'm reading it at a fairly quick clip. I find I'm wanting to take some time every day to read it. I have other things going on as the issue, largely, but yeah. So, I'm okay. I'm alive. I'm okay. Let me lean forward here. Yeah. So that's exciting. That's heartening to see that everyone's loved it so much. So
I'll ask you this, and I'll do my poker face. From what the chapters you've read, what are your takeaways so far?
Yeah, well, so my big thought is, we get all these different point of view chapters. We've gotten Markion, we've gotten Torben Buck, we've gotten Wreath. I think we've gotten Wreath. Have we gotten Wreath yet? Forget if we've gotten Wreath yet.
I think so. Yeah. I think so.
Probably. We've gotten Navar and Elzar in them. But despite that, we got Pika. No, we got Joss. Sorry, I haven't gotten to any Pika. We got Joss Adran yet. There. So all these point of view characters that those of us who've read everything, really it feels so seamless with their characters and their character growth. That he's nailed the voice of all of these characters. At the same time, even though it's all different characters, the story moves along really well. We got a Gira Staros. That was a great chapter too. The story moves along really well and really seamlessly and really fluidly. That's the word. Despite it being handed off, the story is being handed off to all these characters all over the galaxy. So, a bunch of them are in the Jedi Temple at this point. But yeah, I'm super impressed, and just the different linguistic styles that he uses. With Torben, it's a different style than with definitely with Markian or whoever. Just the building up the feel of the world, and so yeah, it's a really impressive start. And again, whenever I want to, I'm doing something and I just want to sit down and read this book, that's a good sign. So those are my thoughts.
I hope
Yeah.
Charles Soule get to do a book that isn't the High Republic. Like, do something in the
Yeah.
established era. Do something with Ben Solo. I'm talking about a novel.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
do
No, I get it.
something with, I don't know. Do something in a different era. I don't know, something that has nothing to do with a big old
Yeah.
interlinked multimedia project. Just do a Star Wars book that's a solo one and done.
Or his young Palpatine story. Doesn't have to be a comic book. It could be a
Sure,
novel.
sure. I would actually like it if it was a novel. I think you get more out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do a
It's true.
Snoke book. I don't care.
Sure. Hey, Snoke. Who needs Snoke? Just kidding.
I need Snoke.
There you go. All right. Shifting gears completely. This is gonna be a whiplash here. Captain Rex pajamas. Captain Rex pajamas. So for Christmas, I gave my younger niece a set of pajamas with a stormtrooper on it, stormtrooper face on it, and she loves them. She enjoys them. She calls them Captain Rex pajamas. Now, whatever. She's 3. She doesn't have to know better. What's fascinating though, this is another thing of just the generational shift in what people's awareness of what Star Wars is, right? I mean, when I was 3, Captain Rex didn't exist in the real world. When I was 3, Return of the Jedi had come out 5 years before. So, that's it. All we had was the original trilogy growing up. Now, kids growing up, they have all of this content, and it's all Star Wars. I mean, if you ask my brother, like when he was here chatting about stuff, he was saying, yeah, he likes animation. He prefers animation to live action, which, fair. So
I feel that, so I get that.
Yeah, like especially Clone Wars and Rebels, he loves it. So I don't know where she picked up Captain Rex. Maybe because I threw that mask on when talking to them on the video, because it's funny, and just trying to do the voice. But I don't know how she gets who Captain Rex is, or she doesn't really have a sense of it. But again, it's that's the reference she goes to. That Clone Wars is as much a fixture in Star Wars. She hasn't seen any of it yet. She's too little, but it's as much a fixture of Star Wars as the original trilogy for her.
Does her parents watch Clone Wars? Maybe she's picked up from that.
Yeah, again, I mean, my brother, he's seen everything so far. So
maybe she saw the helmet and knew that Captain Rex was a thing.
Yeah,
and just thought, close enough.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's sure. I mean, I'm not worried about that, but just the fact that the fascinating thing that her point of reference, even in something that would be original trilogy, it's a Clone Wars character, and so yeah, it's really going to again, it's the same thing we were saying about how growing up, her older sister was born the same year The Mandalorian came out, and how in 20, 30 years when they're everybody. I mean, they're the ones going to Celebration. They're the ones buying the Star Wars holo novels, however medium we have. AI, choose your own adventure. Who knows what horrifying nonsense we got going on, but
insert Star Wars into my brain.
Yeah,
microchips.
Let's hope not. 2D movies, 3D movies, whatever. They're gonna have, I mean, it's already started with Ahsoka, for example, but they're gonna have a sense that it's not gonna be even as cool that Anakin is Vader and that Ahsoka is effectively Vader's apprentice. And that's not going to be a cool thing. It's just going to be a fixture in the story. Now, of course, Vader's story is so climactic and dramatic that it will have that impact because he's the center of the gravity of the whole saga. But
we make some money off Darth Vader merch.
Yeah, that's true too. But the perception, I'm just saying that the perception of what Star Wars is, they didn't experience the change that they're already getting it fixed now and continually growing, right? That's the thing. There's always lots of new content coming out. And so maybe that's the biggest change. That is the biggest change, is that growing up until I saw the that Little Annie with the Shadow poster, which is the greatest film poster of all time, the Phantom Menace poster.
Oh yeah,
Um,
that's
for me, I mean, all Star Wars was like I hadn't really read much of the books. I think I'd read maybe True Superkura or any of the comics, but what Star Wars was these 3 films, and that's it.
Don't you mean
And
6
then,
films? Don't you?
well, no, I'm talking about like this is 1998, right?
Uh,
And then it became the 6 films, but it was a while since till I watched Clone Wars, but now, but in the next generation, no, it's these 9 films and these streaming live action shows and these animated shows and all
at
and
12
all
films,
these
12 films got for Rogue One Solo.
12 films and Clone
No, 11
Wars.
films.
Yeah, 11
11.
films. Yeah. Well, the
There'll be
9
12
saga
next.
films, the 9 saga films. Yeah, the Starfighter and all that. So, um, it's really we don't know. I wonder what it's gonna do. Things hopefully won't be as precious to people anymore. In the sense of this is my Star Wars. Well, if Star Wars keeps changing, you can't really hold on. Maybe that's why people got so up in arms. Just thinking about that now. But anyway, that's going the way of the buffalo. That's going the way of the whatever the ricottans. you know, because my niece, she has a stormtrooper pajamas, but she calls them Captain Rex pajamas, and she loves them, and she's hilarious. So, yeah, there's my thought for this week. I don't know if you have any response to that.
No, I mean, there's one thing I think about.
Mhm.
I think over time, you can't really say Star Wars is the story of Anakin Skywalker anymore. When it's like, how many
That'll be
movies have
possible
anything to do
too.
with Anakin Skywalker at this point?
True.
I've read The High Republic. I would gladly say that had nothing to do with Anakin Skywalker. What does Mandalorian really have to do with Anakin
Right.
Skywalker? Ahsoka a little bit. That's definitely Ahsoka, but that's Ahsoka's
Yes,
story still.
Ahsoka and Kenobi have a lot to do with Anakin Skywalker, but
That's true. Although it's about Ahsoka and her dealing with Anakin Skywalker and other
yes,
things.
yes.
Even Filoni has sort of made the difference as far as he's concerned. Kind of see the difference.
Mm-hmm.
I have forgot the interview what he said, but he said something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Dawn of the Jedi,
Mm-hmm.
unless it's like Anakin's great grandpa.
Mm-hmm.
What that got to do with Anakin Skywalker? So there's one thing, but yeah. You're right. I think Star Wars is changing. I think it has changed. I think making the sequel trilogy changed it, quite frankly, when we started. Because I always say 1 through 6, it's its own thing. It's a complete story. Everything else is its own thing. Even 7 through 9 to some extent. But no, I agree. It's going to be very, very interesting to see where we are when we're all old.
Yes.
But no, that's cute. Rex pajamas. That sounds adorable.
That is so funny. So
you should get
fun times.
You should get some Rex pajamas. Actually,
there we go.
Rex pajamas out there somewhere.
Sure. Well, I'm sure there are. Fun times. Now, going back, another whiplash here. Main topic. Let's talk about it. Let's go for it.
Death Star. What an impressive term of phrase. I love that line. I love that. I love in Andor every time they say Death Star. It's just something just very dramatic about that. Which gets us to the topic of the Death Star. So I got some notes here. I think how we're gonna do. I want to start with some out of universe stuff, and then we can get to the cool, fun in universe stuff. So for me, sorry, I saw my cat. For me. The Death Star is the only Star Wars super weapon in the history of the Star Wars super weapons, of which there are a lot, that works world building wise, plot wise, thematically. And I'm talking about the first Death Star, by the way, because that's actually something that's interesting. It's like when we say the Death Star, we're always talking about the first one. Like, I don't think anybody ever automatically goes to, when we say the Death Star, we're talking about Death Star 2. The Death Star, the original, the 1977 Star Wars super weapon. Nothing has surpassed it in terms of how it works in the narrative, in the world building, in the thematics. No super weapons, both canon and Legends, really ever lives up, has lived up ever to its its sheer brilliance. Maybe the closest that ever came to it was the Star Forge and Knights of the Old Republic one. And even then, that's a little different. Because Knights of the Old Republic one's got a bit of a different narrative thing. But not Star Killer, not the Star Destroyers, not any of the Legend super weapons, the Sun Crusher, the Galaxy Gun, the World Devastator. All those, the Malevolence. That nothing has lived up to such a strong, just super weapon. And I just think that's so fascinating. Just how much the power that we are dealing with is immeasurable. Quote critic. And even the meta narrative of the Death Star that a lot of Dark Time stories have, where it's like there's always a little hint of like the Empire's got some grand plan. The Empire's got some big overarching thing in almost every Dark Time story. Not every Dark Time story, but there's always a little bit of a hint of like something's going on, like hear whispers of like something, or somebody mentions Project Stardust, and it's like, oh, we know what that is now. And it's amazing just how even when new entries of Star Wars come, how they're able to reinforce and strengthen the original Death Star and its place in the narrative, and its place in the lore, its place in the concept of Star Wars. And again, just nothing ever has lived up to it. Nothing, not even its various clones.
Right.
Not nothing. Not even there's no grand Star Killer based narrative in between episodes 6 and 7 that they're trying to do. At least not yet. I mean, there's some stuff we see Ilum, but it's like, outside of that, there's not much. It's just amazing. It's a testament to the storytelling of the original 77 film. That's my opening salvo. Matthew, the Death Star.
Yeah, I mean, taking from Howl's Moving Castle, or maybe that's that's later. What's the fortress that George Lucas based it off of?
Fortress?
Hidden Fortress, that one. Yeah, which I haven't seen yet, but I need to see it. That concept of just this monstrosity that can really be destructive, this destructive technological terror. Yeah, I mean, you say, I agree with what you're saying in terms of it's never been paralleled. It just underscores how disappointing it is when they keep going back to these super weapons.
Even Death Star 2, unfortunately.
Yeah, even Death Star 2. I think we need to actually look back at the reception of Return of the Jedi and realize that wasn't as received as well as we remember it being. Of course, I was minus 2 years old, as I've just established, when that one came out. So, that you do it once and you really nail it, and it's true. I mean, and we'll get into why it works so well, but you do it twice. Okay, George, what are you doing? JJ, what are you doing? This is just another Death Star. Even in the script, it's like the Death Star, and then Poe's all no, this is even bigger. So like, and then of course JJ again with the Star Destroyers that can wipe out a planet themselves and all that. Yeah, and the fact that we have all this storytelling, including starting with Rogue One and Catalyst, and now especially that last arc of Andor. That it's really and even things with Thrawn, the Thrawn novels, and even going back to the Crystal Crisis arc, the unfinished Clone Wars episodes, right?
Oh yeah.
All that, the little moment it's in Attack of the Clones, right, where the Poggle takes the plans. That those have been built in because this one development, and we'll get into this again in a bit, but yeah, it's even been a way to tie the trilogies together then in that case, in that sense. And so it really, I mean, even the thing is, things that are derivative of the Death Star, like things that come after, they're only interesting because they're derivative of the Death Star. I would argue, of course, the things that come before, like the Malevolence, like the Lucre Hulk Center, right? Those things, because they're on the way to the development of the Death Star, which is itself this fascinating story. Why would anyone want a weapon that big. That's relevant in the news right now. Why does anyone want nuclear weapons at all? I understand. I know why. Well, power and fear, right? I mean, you know, Iran and Israel saying, you demilitarize, no, you demilitarize, no, you demilitarize. And so yeah, it really, I mean, it works on that level, of course. Yeah, I mean, at the height of the Cold War, it makes sense too. So yeah, I mean, that's the kind of the real world parallel that George was definitely going for here is, and you gotta be suspicious of anyone who builds something like that, right?
Right.
Mhm.
I mean, no, you're right. I mean, evil people building super weapons isn't necessarily. It makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
that's they love their big. Bad guys love their big guns.
Mhm.
So
Even the thing
building
on
things that.
Malachor, that the temple of Malachor, which I want to know more about too.
Oh
But yeah.
yeah. So the Empire building more of these things afterwards,
Hmm.
makes total sense. But the problem is, again, from a narrative perspective, none
Yeah.
of them have really any weight. Even the Death Star too. It's like,
Hmm.
oh yeah, Death Star. But there's no Death Star. The Emperor's there. You gotta attack it. Like it's really
Hmm.
the second Death Star is just we need a place to go and blow something up and
Yeah.
kill the Emperor in it.
Hmm.
Right. Whereas like the first Death Star, it's like it's part
Hmm.
of the narrative. It's sort of like and it's part of
Yeah.
like the Emperor is building the super weapon. This is his ultimate consolidation of power. This is
Hmm.
his magnum opus. And we gotta destroy it, otherwise all things are doomed.
Hmm.
Whereas Death Star 2, Star Killer, just kind of like, oh, here's the place we gotta go. We gotta do something.
Hmm.
And bad guys are there.
Hmm.
Um, it's like the weight of the second Death Star, for instance, isn't even like the Death Star itself. It's just what's happening inside it, and it's sort of like,
Yeah.
well, that could happen
True.
anywhere. Like originally, it was going to happen in Palpatine's palace on Coruscant,
Yeah.
or Hab Abaddon, as it was going to be
Hmm.
called back in the day. Um, so apparently, there's going to be
Hmm.
two Death Stars built simultaneously and smaller. Um,
Hmm.
which would have been somewhat interesting. But yeah, you're right. It's like n- it's not just they're building Death Stars after the fact.
Hmm.
It's there's no weight behind these things. They're just here's the
Yeah.
weapon. It's like almost like it's
Hmm.
window dressing.
Yeah. Or
Uh,
parody almost.
oh yeah, I think Dark
You
Order
know.
definitely got more of a meta parody thing, whereas Death Star 2 got a little bit more of that window
Yeah.
dressing. I
Yeah.
think you
That's a
could
good
have
way of
done
putting it.
something with the secret fleet. I thought that was interesting. They
Yeah.
just don't do enough with it. Secret fleets are definitely something. I mean, Thrawn trilogy had a secret fleet.
True.
Um,
Also, I mean, Snoke's boudoir.
that's true. Yep, yep.
Release whatever the official
The
name for that thing is.
supremacy.
That
Although I
thing.
think that's more akin to Vader's Star Destroyer, the
True. That's more the
Executor.
executor. Which I mean,
Which I
that's
like.
still the theme of gigantism or whatever. Not gigantism. There's colossalism. These
Military supremacy or something.
sure, but just creating something massive upon massive.
Right.
Right. That's the thing with the supremacy. Star destroyers can fit into it's like basically its docking base. So
I mean,
yeah.
and this is not a spoiler. This is what's been stated before in the early issues, but like in the Kylo Ren comic,
Mm-hmm.
Cuck is saying like that was how we built our fleets. The supremacy was one of our basically
Yeah.
um uh a shipbuilding
Yeah.
place.
Interesting. I didn't remember that. Fair
It
enough.
says it like in the first issue, or it's like Star Killer, lost a Star Killer, and the supremacy
Right.
means that their
Yeah, I remember
shipyards have
that.
been
Okay.
destroyed, and they need a place to go and
Right.
restock.
Mhm.
Good old logistics, folks. That's how you
Yeah.
run an empire. Um, but
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
that's definitely So just kind of to get the narrative out of the way, and again, like you said, it's bridges. It's one of the many
Mhm.
bridges of the Dark Times era, where it's sort of like
Mhm.
even when you don't see it, there's always like some. I mean, not every story, obviously, but there's always like whispers of like, "Hey, what's the Empire doing over here? Why are
Right.
they collecting all these resources? Why are they? Where's this massive slave labor going on? Where's this all going? It's
Right.
like all these little things, but it's all connected. It's the conspiracy board, but actually true of like
Mhm.
the Death Star.
Right.
And now to go into the actual in-universe
Mhm.
stuff.
Yep.
All right, so the Death Star, as we said before, it's one of the big links between the prequels and and the originals.
Mhm.
And I think that the Death Star and its construction is sorry, I get like this light in my face. I'm
That's
so
okay.
sorry.
Mhm.
And its construction is very much the construction and consolidation of Palpatine's power. The more it's being built, the more power that Palpatine has consolidated over time.
Mhm.
Because, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, just because Palpatine declared himself emperor, he was not at the zenith of his power. He still had more power that he needed to consolidate.
Mhm.
He got the next step, but just because he's emperor now doesn't mean he can start
Right.
automatically just start like zapping senators left, right, and center. Which would be hilarious. Like, I'm the emperor
The
now.
Senate existed.
Yeah, the Senate existed. He couldn't just start like, yeah, okay, I'm the emperor now. Now I'm gonna send the fleet to Alderaan and Corellia, destroy you all. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah. Just blow everything up because I say so.
Mm.
Um, he had to do it slowly. He had to do it methodically. He had to
Mhm.
build legitimacy. Because I've been thinking about this for a while.
Mhm.
I think that we want to believe that democracy is like the most purest form of government, yada yada yada. But it's like, well, then why have absolute monarchs have existed for centuries? Why have
Mhm.
other absolutists have been around for centuries?
Mhm.
Palpatine's empire lasted 25 years,
Yeah.
but the Romanov dynasty lasted for 300. Chinese dynasty lasted for almost 1,000 years.
Right.
Rome lasted for a couple hundred years too.
Mhm.
So it's sort of like, well, okay, why did they last so long? And Gareth, my cat
There we
keeps
go.
trying.
Cat
Um,
signing
cat
because
sighting.
they all like cats is how they lasted so long. That's clearly part of
Exactly.
it. So the
Exactly.
Egyptians, I mean, the Egyptians worship them. So
Well, actually, that weirdly gets into a weird point. It's like, well,
yeah.
all governments need to derive legitimacy from somewhere.
Mhm.
Most of those ancient medieval or semi-medieval countries, it
Mhm.
was God, sovereignty, and
Mhm.
sometimes prosperity. And I'm not talking about
Mhm.
like middle class prosperity. I'm talking about like,
Yeah.
hang on,
Oh,
my cat.
what's cat signing? Middle
Oopsie.
class prosperity.
Ah,
Cat wants to be on Iron
stepped
Cannon.
on my shoe.
There
Um,
you go. It happens.
I know. Sorry.
Yeah. Does it get?
Well, I'm not talking about middle class prosperity. I'm talking about you had a good harvest.
Yeah.
Right? So these are the things that these absolute monarchs or emperors of
Mhm.
Rome or sometimes China, derive their legitimacy from.
Mhm.
Palpatine, on the other hand, he only drove his legitimacy because he's like, I won the Clone War and I
Yeah.
brought peace and stability. So that's my legitimacy. There's no God.
Mhm.
We're not really a godly empire, weirdly.
Mhm.
Despite being a Sith Lord. We're not doing any of that. We're a very tech-based empire.
Mhm.
So it's like, well, I won the Clone Wars, so that's it. That's all you need. Um,
Mhm.
so in my kind of weird theology time with Joel moment, thank you. I kind of believe that the construction of the Death Star is in a weird way Palpatine is building the galaxy's new god.
Mhm.
Through this weapon and terror, he will cement his legitimacy. This is what will make his empire last for 1,000 years. You know, and obviously the clones.
Yeah.
He will have complete legitimacy. This is what people will, well, why they believe he will rule forever. Blah 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 blah. Order and whatnot.
Mhm.
But unlike things like, I don't know, God or, prosperity, or even in democracies where it's like, well,
Mhm.
legitimacy comes from, being voted by the people.
Right.
That's why we don't have violent revolutions all the time. Um, we will, he has that mandate.
Mhm.
And then when the rebels blow that up,
Right.
well, there's no mandate anymore outside of like, well, you got a big military that's still loyal, so
Mhm.
good luck. Um, and he's hollowed out so many institutions by that point. It's like, well, all he really has is the military,
Mhm.
and he can't spread that too thin. Otherwise, look what happens. So,
Right.
my theological kind of idea is Palpatine through the Death Star tries to reconstruct galactic society to create the legitimacy of his rule,
Mhm.
and he fails miserably because it's something direct outside of something more ethereal than, I don't know, divine right of the Force or other
Mhm.
things that ancient rulers that lasted longer than Palpatine all
Right.
derive their legitimacy from.
Mm.
Okay, I've talked a lot. I
Yeah.
rambled. I'm sorry. I had all these thoughts in my head, and I kind of needed to get them out. But
Yeah.
as you as a theologian and someone who kind of knows all of the ancient medieval
Yeah.
things that want to get the blessing of the Pope, what are your thoughts on all this?
So, I mean, yeah, it definitely fits with, the parallel to, and it's tricky because, Order 66 is a tragedy. The decline of Christendom and the rise of secularism isn't wholesale a tragedy, but there are a lot of theologians out there talking about how, once we had churches and community organizations and, and this is the real world parallel right here is what I'm getting at. And community organizations and belief in the transcendent and belief in meaning beyond life, beyond death, meaning in life and death, really. Now, where we have, these two major institutions that are trying to vie for our allegiance, and it's the state and the market, right? And in time of the Cold War, the Soviet Union, the state won. Now we're definitely seeing the markets pretty much won. That's what capitalism is. And so the real tragedy there, and up in the middle comes, I'm thinking this because my day job, thinking about Catholic social teaching a lot, and just how popes have said, no, hold on a minute. Market economies have good things, state interventions have good things, democracy is a great thing. The market on its own, the power of the state on its own, are antithetical to democracy. When Palpatine, you're right. It encompasses this belief, because the Death Star itself isn't the god we're talking about. What we're talking about, the Empire itself, is the god, right? The
state,
the order of the Empire, which, unlike the Soviet Union, really works with the corporations, works with Sinar, works with to preserve massive wealth inequality.
There's actually a term for this. That's why, in the Marxist terms, Palpatine would be considered a Bonapartist, because he is a monarch who's trying to function a capitalist economy.
Right. Interesting.
Which, because not all monarchs technically lived in capitalist economies, and that's the whole thing of like pre-capitalist monarchy and feudalism, blah blah blah.
Yeah, that's the thing. Well, like you're getting at, monarchies with real power predate capitalism. Capitalism was actually created when, or not created, really emerged as part of parliamentary kind of circumscribing of property, and giving it over to corporate personality. That's a whole other thing. Going back to my undergrad, The Great Transformation by Carl Polanyi, interesting book that I haven't read in 15 years. But anyway, yeah, the order of the state, the order of this absolute power, and yeah, like you said, he could clone wars. Say, I won the Clone War. He still had the Senate to deal with. What he didn't have to deal with was the Jedi, right? That's what is so important about Order 66 is, if the Jedi existed at the same time as the Death Star, the Jedi would just take care of the Death Star. They'd just take it out or something. They'd use the Force to take care of the Kyber or something. Who knows? But
they'd be leading the rebellion. What they'd be doing?
Yeah, they'd be. That's kind of what I'm getting at. But if people believed in the Jedi still, if people believed in the Force still, then they wouldn't have believed in Palpatine anymore yet, or they wouldn't have been even afraid of Palpatine. And that's just it. To your point, the Jedi, or the memory of the Jedi that Luke being there keeps alive, that Ahsoka keeps alive, is rekindles their faith in the Force. We even see that with the Force healer in Andor, right? And Bix going off and doing her thing. Yeah, that keeping the flame of hope alive and of freedom alive, because keeping the flame of meaning beyond just this empire, just this state, just this technocratic order. And on its own, without the Death Star, it's kind of grotesque enough, but this is the symbolic of just how brutal it is, and how all encompassing it is. It's I can bring this down now. What's fascinating is the shape of it. Is two things to note there. It's a circle, and channeling our buddy Din, who pays attention to these things, and has pointed out, the triangle wedge of the Star Destroyer, and the point, the dart of the X, and things like of the X-wing and things like that. The Death Star, a circle is meant to be all encompassing, and meant to gather everything in and hold it all in one uniform conformity, as opposed to Starlight Beacon, for example, which tried to be all the Republic. The Death Star is trying to be all the Empire. And so, yeah, it really symbolizes that. The other thing, though, is that what other thing is it in the shape of? It's literally in the shape of a target. At least in our world, right? The circle within the circle, right? It's literally in the shape of a target where you can throw a dart at it, and that's what it's. You kind of made a joke about the Death Star too. They need a thing to blow up. That's in both Death Stars. That's the arrogance, and even in Starkiller Base, the arrogance of Palpatine and of the First Order is giving them a target to aim for, because you can't. He thought he thought he killed the Force. He thought he conquered the Force, but you can't conquer the Force. You can't conquer an idea. You can take out a battle station.
One thing I've always found fascinating, if we don't take the sequels into account, or even some stuff in Legends, and if we do take some stuff in Legends and obviously the sequels, then it gets a little bit. I mean, I still think it gets interesting. Is Palpatine never tried to establish a theocracy. The Empire is not a theocracy. I think of
no.
To me, theocracy is its own version of right wing governance to an extent, but we see it Iran, we see technically it's Vatican City. At least the old days of the Vatican City. Back when the Pope had some actual power.
Sure.
Religion, but the Empire is not a theocracy. There's no state religion. There's no the dark side. Where you look at like absolute monarchs like the Tsar, he is both the protector of all Orthodox Slavic peoples, something. The Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, he is the defender of the faiths.
Yeah.
Various kings in Europe are defending the Catholic Church, especially in France, and some of the German states before modern Germany, and then they get Protestant.
Right.
Queen of England, head of the church. Although that was also because Henry wanted a divorce.
It's complicated.
That one's a bit more complicated. Anglican Church,
That's my church.
Palpatine is the Sith Lord. He is a practitioner of this specific sect of dark side worship, which really needs to get fleshed out. I'll get into that maybe another day. Of what makes a difference between a Sith and just some rando red lightsaber. But and yet we never. And to be fair, this might also just be he never got to this point in both canon and Legends, and maybe he would have if he lasted longer. He never tried to establish a Sithocracy. Never tried to establish a Sith theocracy in the galaxy. The Empire is almost anti-spiritual, even not even anti-magic almost, which is something the Darth Maul show is apparently going to get into, where it's like Maul's like, wait a minute, I didn't expect the Empire to be like this. It's like this is a dark side. This is like even this is like just anti-magic. It does have some even within. You hear it has inquisitors and stuff like that, but it's like when you see the Empire for the most part, it's like just scientists or military guys. It's like
Yeah.
Even Vader, even a No Hope, Vader's like, don't be too proud of this technological terror you
Right.
constructed. You will destroy a planet, insignificant, next to the power of the Force. Like this is what the Empire thinks is the pinnacle of power.
Mhm.
Not the Force, which the Emperor and Vader can control. It's this
Mhm.
machine. It is even I remember a great tweet back on Twitter back in the day where somebody said that Andor to them made the Zeistin Star Destroyer fleet and Rise of Skywalker make sense to them because they were like, well, why isn't the Sith fleet all Sithy and gothic and weird with like weird shapes and it's just a bunch of Star Destroyers?
Mhm.
And they're like, well, no, that makes total sense now because that's Palpatine. He's
Yeah.
not about really the cool Sithy aesthetics with like weird gothy horns and
Mhm.
tattoos, and he is a manufactured industrial everything kind of off the
Mhm.
conveyor belt. This is just my fleet. They're all just regular Star Destroyers.
Mhm.
There's nothing cool about this, and that's kind of the point. It's all very uniformed and stiff
Yeah.
and cold. Even his most sissy like fleet is still almost very anti-wizard.
Yeah.
Um,
Anti-wizard.
which is
It's
kind of
so
weird.
not wizard. It's so not wizard.
It's not wizard. I know. I hope I'm making sense when I'm saying all
Yeah,
this.
you're making lots of sense, and
Uh,
kind of what I'm
okay,
getting at too. But go ahead, keep going.
but and it's and I mean I also think it's just a comment on 20th century governance. Like I'm
Yeah.
not. I don't want to come off as like I'm actually pro absolute monarchy. Let's restore the monarchy.
Mhm.
Let's go. Give Charles his rightful power as king. Blah blah blah. I'm not like that, but I know some people who are. Like
Yeah.
that's actual conservatives in
Well,
my eyes.
well,
Like
no, there are people who believe that God wants Trump to bring America back to righteousness. There's some people who like make America great again, and I'll get into all of that
but
in a bit when you're done.
I mean yeah, but I'm talking about like
Mhm.
no, we gotta go back to monarchy, man. The bloodline.
Yeah,
The
like
Habsburgs. Bring
Tolkien
back
was kind of like that a little bit.
Tolkien was totally all about that life.
Yeah,
But Aragorn's Charlemagne. I have a whole thing to
yeah.
go on. But
Oh
anyway,
yeah, I know. Yeah,
but it's like in some ways, again, I think that's also a comment on
mhm.
Palpatine is a modern day 20th, maybe even 19th century, if you want to go like Napoleon III dictator,
Mhm.
because I kind of do think even absolute monarchs were never as powerful as I think a lot of people want to say they were. People want to equate absolute monarchs to dictators, and I actually don't know if I
Mm,
100% agree with that for a lot of reasons.
mm,
One, because of like, obviously, yeah, there were some crazy monarchs out there, and there were mad kings. Um, but there's always like bargains and deals and limitations on their power with like if they just start going against the church, which was its own power, that get them in trouble.
mhm.
You got the lords and ladies and barons that got them in trouble, depending on how no tact there
Yeah,
was.
tactless.
There were traditions, and you have all these things, and it's like you're bound
Mhm.
by tradition, you're bound by fate, you're bound
Mhm.
by blah 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 blah, all
Yeah,
sorts of things. All these kind of traditions and norms.
done by
Um,
duty. Duty was a huge,
and
huge
duty.
thing, right?
Yeah. And duty, which to be fair is also a problem even in democratic countries where everything's
Sure.
based off norms and you decide, well, the norms don't matter anymore. And some kings did that, and they got in trouble. Or
Yeah,
um
that's true. Well, they
but
incited rebellion. Yeah.
that's why when future kings came back in their bloodlines restored or just new kings were installed, they're like, okay, we're not gonna do that anymore.
Yeah.
But dictators like Palpatine, who and modern dictators in
Mhm.
general, you know, there's almost a revolutionary like element to them where it's like, maybe not revolutionary, but definitely like,
Mm.
Palpatine's like, I'm not emperor because the Force willed me to do so. Something divine right of the Force slash dark side. There
Mm.
is no Yoda puts the crown on Palpatine's head.
Right.
Now come Emperor of. Maybe right? It's like no, Palpatine just manipulates the Senate to make
Mhm.
him dictator, gives him a fancy title that's
Mhm.
monarchical for some.
Emperor.
It's
Yeah.
very Emperor, very
Mhm.
Caesar. I mean, this is where Napoleon and Caesar come
Right.
in. And it's like, I'm not bound by tradition or fate or even duty. I
Mhm.
won the Clone Wars. It's about me, suckers. So
Yeah.
that's why it all starts and ends with me. There is no Palpatine bloodline, and even if there was,
Right.
I'd have a feeling that my kid probably won't last that long anyway. So
Well, if there's a Palpatine bloodline, uh, good, force sensitive. I can infuse my soul into her,
that
and
too.
she can,
I mean, that too. But even if,
hmm,
like, if Palpatine wasn't a force sensitive, it just like went mortal and just like
right.
had actually tried to establish like a dynasty like the Napoleons
Hmm.
did. Probably the leadership's just gonna get worse and worse, and then won't last very long.
Hmm.
Um, so again, I think that's another big kind of thing about if we're trying to do some real world comparisons here between Palpatine,
Yeah.
modern states, modern capitalist states, and even feudal systems. It's
Hmm.
like it's the bones of legitimacy the empire built are just so freaking fragile. No
Hmm.
wonder it fell after he died.
Right.
He ran it into the ground so quick. But continue. Anything in my
Well,
rambles that made sense?
I mean, a few things to think about the Death Star. I mean, you see Thrawn being like, why are we putting all our eggs in this one spherical basket? That doesn't make sense. What if someone destroys it? Then all our eggs are broken. All eggs are gone. Um, so that also, we have the domain, like the chessboard, and Operation Cinder, the contingency, where he didn't want anyone to succeed him, and that is another difference, right? Is you talk about Henry VIII, for example. I mean, what he was deeply, deeply worried about was the stability of England, right? That's why he needed a male heir in order to ensure the stability. His daughter ensured the stability. Elizabeth II, Elizabeth I ensured the stability of England. But that's what he was so worried and anxious about. He was bound by the duty to preserve this order in this community, and this is the positive read of all that, right? Um, I'm going to have that because one of the ways he wanted to preserve that order was through a church. And how now we have the Anglican Communion. But again, way more complicated than that. But that's the positive side of it. Yeah, with Palpatine, it was again, it's again the belief in the Empire. It's not belief in the belief in
Believe
the
in
Empire, and
himself,
belief
honestly.
in himself, right? That for people to say, uh, well, yes and no, in that in terms of the popular imagination, people will say not so much that Palpatine hold for them to see, not that Palpatine holds their lives in his hand, but the Empire holds their lives in its hand, right?
Right.
This anonymous symbol, the scarf up here, um, because it's this anonymous institution.
Mhm.
Palpatine is content. This is another weird thing. Palpatine is content with being hidden, right? He's content with, when he has to come out of the shadows, he's the gentle Uncle Sheev, which we know is just an illusion. But he's content with people barely even knowing what happened with him. I think he's much because that means the more distance he has between um, himself and his power, the Empire,
Mhm.
his political power at least, the more insulated he is from attacks on it, which is why, of course, when Luke is able to go right at him, right to him, rather, I should say, in Return of the Jedi, uh, he's that's when he's able when he falls. Of course, it's Anakin who does it, but the one who's been there all along. But he's content to be the puppet master pulling the strings
Mhm.
that nobody knows about, right? That's also partly probably why the secret of who Vader is was so important, because that's a vulnerability, a liability potentially, um, that, and also the mystery and the anonymity of who Vader is. That's also, I mean, part of the fearsomeness is what I'm getting at. The fearsomeness and the ability to manipulate, to pull levers and to move things. Like very few people, like how
Mhm.
many people could have an audience with Palpatine? How many people could be in an audience with Palpatine?
Apparently, Major Partagas could because he always talked about how he visits
Yeah,
Palpatine in
yeah,
Andor.
Partagas, although maybe he's lying.
Maybe.
Krennic,
I wonder
Vader,
if he's lying
Tarkin.
about that too.
Yeah,
Vader definitely. Maybe Vader can.
Yeah, Vader, Tarkin. I mean Thrawn, but like, how many people would regularly meet with him?
I guess probably Vader and Tarkin are probably like the two I could see the most.
Yeah, and of course Yuktashu and
Masameda
and those guys, but those folks sly more. But yeah, and so the Death Star becomes this ultimate symbol of, I really like what you're calling it, the new god, the new object of worship, and worship not so much about love but of fear. Right, that's exactly what Tarkin says. Fear, we don't need the Senate. Fear will keep the planets in line.
I mean, when I bring it up because like one of the things I've always asked myself. I mean, obviously it's fiction. We can't compare the real world to a lot of things to a certain extent.
Sure.
There's
a fantasy.
People like to say, oh, fascist states don't last very long. They burn themselves, and it's true. But then I'm like, but we've had forms of absolute rule by people that lasted for centuries. Explain the Romanovs, explain the Habsburgs, explain the emperors of Rome. I mean, obviously the dynasties changed and maybe the individual families, and there were definitely moments of chaos, but it's like the actual system of emperorship lasted for a couple more 100 years. Before, even longer if you want to include the Byzantians as part of that lineage.
Well, yeah, it's definitely part of the Roman Empire,
So, I'm like, well, why did they last so long? And Palpatine's empire is only 25 years long. And that's sort of, and I think a lot of it, again, is that sort of, it's built on such fragile, bare bones legitimacy. It's not as deeply rooted in society. Most people probably in the Empire, outside of the humans, probably remember what life was like under the Republic. And even the older humans still, but there are still a lot of probably remember. So it's not like you completely have, like Palpatine got like what? One generation in before it all came coming down. So that's kind of the question I was asking myself when I was making these notes of like, okay, in the real world, we have had monarchs and absolute rulers who have lasted much longer. Other systems of absolute rule in the 20th century have gone down quicker, for sure. We got Mr. Mustache Man. He only lasted 12 years before he destroyed himself. Mussolini, honestly, this is my hot take. If he hadn't allied with Germany, stayed neutral, he could have been like Franco and just lasted until he died. Franco's regime fell after he died.
Right.
I mean, he died naturally, but it's like,
we're getting at his cult of personality, right?
Yeah. But back to the Death Star. I kind of feel like we got off track. I'm sorry.
No, that's the thing, is this is what the Death Star symbolizes, right?
Right.
So we're not off track. Keep going.
Yeah, you're talking about Thrawn, like the he believed in a strong navy, which is correct. Which is, I think, would have been way more strategically helpful. If you just want to be cruelly pragmatic.
The tag doctrine.
Yeah, the tag doctrine, Thrawn doctrine. But one of the reasons why Palpatine didn't want to do that is because, again, he wanted to consolidate power. A navy that's too spread thin. It's like, well, that gives admirals and generals, freedom to kind of maneuver and do their own thing. Palpatine, I remember going back to the original 1991 Thrawn trilogy, which me and Dominic did a review of last week. Plug. Thrawn brought up the fact that the Death Star was created for mostly political reasons, to consolidate power in the military against the Navy, to consolidate, the forces more directly under Palpatine's reign. Hang on, let me have a water.
I mean, if I can jump in. No, you want to keep going? Okay, you're ready to go. Go for it.
That's just, it's Palpatine's always trying to, Palpatine's weird in that he, as much as he doesn't micromanage as you think he would, um, uh, he also is all about consolidating power. I mean, Grand Admirals were created to consolidate power and have more people personally appointed by him.
Mm-hmm.
Same with Grand Moffs. Obviously, it was to defeat.
Yeah.
This was obviously to get rid of the Senate and have no more parallel institutions of power, so that only
Mm-hmm.
he is the only thing that derives power.
Mm-hmm.
So again, even within the military, Palpatine is ensuring that he's basically coup-proofing the Empire by building the Death Star.
Sure.
Although it's interesting that in the New Hope novel and audio drama, there is a question of like, would Tarkin have turned on Palpatine if he controlled the Death Star? Now this is pre-Palpatine the Sith Lord. Um
Right.
so it's a bit unsure, but there is a little bit of a question of like, I mean, Karkin's the one who's got the Death Star. If
Yeah.
it's hovering over Coruscant, it's like, you just have to turn the laser disc just a little bit to the corner.
Yeah.
Whoop.
Pull an Empress Hoshisato.
Yeah.
That
But that again, that's another thing the Death Star symbolizes, that consolidation of power, not just within the galaxy, but within the Empire itself.
Yeah, I mean, look at how the thing was constructed and had to be constructed based on the nationalization of all these industries. And we knew that happened in the Empire anyway. It's something Mon Mothma in Mask of Fear tries to use as an argument to say he's going to take over your corporation, your ability to get rich. Maybe you want to help this bill that's also going to happen to help other people. That consolidation of all these industries and all these labor forces into one project. I can see that being, that being a way of consolidating the empire. Also, we saw it with the secrecy, with the Hanse meeting, whatever it's called, in Andor. Though it's this privileged information, it's this this carrot that's saying like, oh, I know what this thing is. You don't know what this thing is. I know what's going on. If you work hard enough, if you obey enough, you'll know what's going on. I think there's a little bit of that going on there. But speaking of just the symbol of why something like this is built in the first place, why so many people are good with it being built in the first place, why we have nuclear weapons, why a lot of regimes have fallen in the last 100 years, but they keep popping up and democracy keeps being on life support in so many parts of the world. And it makes me wonder.
The question of whether or not democracy is even that over, is it even the end all be all?
Well, so here's what I'm wondering is,
yes.
Is Nemec even right about this whole was it the imperial need for control is so desperate because it's so unnatural, and that fear is a pure idea, freedom is a pure idea. What if it's the opposite? What if fear is the pure idea? Is the natural state of things? What if, and I'm being kind of pessimistic here, but I'll get at the more hopeful point in a second. But what if it's, I mean, that's the thing is, Nemec didn't watch the prequels. Tyranny doesn't require constant effort. Tyranny is the thing that requires cowardice and requires complacency, right? It doesn't need constant effort. There's a great Onion. The Onion just had an editorial saying, Congress, we need your cowardice more than ever. Congress, go and it's the Onion. So that what they're saying is the opposite, right? Is the natural state of human nature, at least the natural position of nature is human nature is to surrender our freedom for someone who will keep us safe. I wonder if that's what childhood is by definition, but necessarily it's not a voluntary surrender of freedom. If my nieces are gonna go do something that is gonna hurt them, and my brother says don't do that, they better obey. They don't have freedom. They don't have a choice there. But for adults, we have to actually grow up. We actually have to be, in order to, or in order to be responsible with our freedom, we have to grow up. And we, so much of ourselves, this is kind of getting into psychology now, but so much of ourselves are just inner child running rampant, and we give away our freedom to the loudest, strongest voice that will say, keep us safe. And so, yeah, if Palpatine comes in and going to make the galaxy great again by building this Death Star, so many folks are going to be for it, or so afraid of it they say we might as well. And it brings back to, the Death Star is this ultimate symbol of George. Even before he knew this was going to be the story he was going to eventually tell, 25 years later or whatever it is, 22 years later? Yeah, 22 years later, 1977 to 1999. Democracies aren't stolen, they're given away. And freedom is brutal. Freedom is fragile. Uh, you know, the imperial need for control is so successful because we so often fall back into it. I think Nemec is wrong. I know he's trying to inspire hope. He's trying to say that it's possible, but that's the thing. Remember this: try, keep going, keep fighting, keep being diligent, keep being sensible. But we need to keep pushing forward. We need to have that momentum to push forward. And then there's positive inertia, the inertia of movement that does end up breaking the back of the empire. But yeah, I don't know.
Here's a kind of another thought to kind of maybe put some more things in perspective.
Yeah.
Remember we talking about Tolkien, how Tolkien's all about absolute monarchy and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Tolkien also hated modernity. He hated the modern state. And if you lived in the medieval countryside England, you never met the king. Most people never met the king in their life. The king just can't go, hey, that village across the street? Yeah, torch it. Maybe he could, but it would take like days.
No.
Take forever. Most of the time, probably even he'd have to know it exists first and foremost.
There would also be probably folks around him saying, "No, we're not going to do that."
That too.
No, in Tolkien's time, definitely.
That's Sauron. Sauron is weirdly industrial modernity.
Yeah,
he is able to do all sorts of things where it's like, if you had a crazy king, you kind of would live in like an anarchical state where it's like maybe the guys in the castle might be having to do some weird stuff to keep the king from not torching them. But it's like if you lived in the countryside like a million miles away, it's like, yeah, you heard maybe the king's a little nutty. Who cares? Like, just go about your day, get your crops, make sure you don't get the plague. And if the king's a good king, then everything kind of works in tandem. So, there is kind of a weirdness in George's Star Wars where there's almost like the Empire represents this modernity. Especially because another thing you gotta remember about Star Wars is George comes from like the boomer, new left, very hippie, very weird ideologies, all that are kind of don't make sense. It's very you gotta do a deep dive into like what the 60s political philosophy was at the time to kind of get it, and what George was probably exposed to in some ways. To kind of really get it. It's not just Vietnam, it's also just these other esoteric ideas that are very confusing, and I don't even understand them myself. I just know about them offhand. But anyway.
I don't know how much George believed in all that. I thought he was a bit more of a moderate.
Maybe he moderated over time. It's been 70s still. But, you kind of, regardless of like democracy, if you kind of believe the Republic as almost this medieval, almost Tolkien-esque fantasy kingdom of like the wise Senate in place of the king. Yeah, everyone helps each other out, but no one really bothers to like,
the Jedi Council.
No one really bothers to like impose a certain modernity or ideology or rule upon the various planets. You kind of govern yourselves. There's even stuff in the Republic that sort of like feels like the Republic's very decentralized organization, more or less. Where it's like the planets kind of are mostly left to their own devices.
There's the RDC.
Yeah.
There's no standing army, and it's the Jedi who can come and really show people who they are and help people build their communities and defend them from this marauding, take everything, do what you want, childish Nile. Maybe they're also this kind of, the Uruk-hai industrialization in
So
a way.
and Palpatine's the industrial
Yeah.
Death Star thing. So
Yeah.
I think what I'm trying to get at is, I think maybe Nemec could be right, because I think people do like their freedom. Maybe not in the sense of like the 20th century, like vote every election period.
Yeah.
But hey, just leave me to my farm. Let me do my thing.
Sure.
Don't
Yeah.
tax me, king. Well, that's more the barons. Whether or not they got their medieval lords or ladies, or they have a senate or not. It's
Yeah.
like, well, if things start to, because when the
Yeah.
taxes do go up and the food prices go up because or they're being forced to conscript into the army, that's when most of the time people always do rise up and trying to take down the king or the czar or the Caesar or Napoleon. Although Napoleon III fell because of the war with Germany.
Right. I mean, feel like their independence. But no, what people like is the same constancy. And if you can be saying you're on the side of constancy or of halting progress and halting change, I'm just trying to make sense of the current time in a lot of ways is what I'm doing here. To say what's happening in that their country isn't that new. I mean, you've made this point lots, is whenever there's been a mass social change in the US or elsewhere, there's been a big pushback. There's always been this big pushback against change. And I think, I mean, that's the thing. That's where, with authority being, with freedom being brittle, and freedom being fragile and requires constant effort, is because what we like is the same. I mean, we're wired that way. Homeostasis, right? We're wired to be comfortable with, most of us, not everyone, wired to be comfortable with what we know, right? We're comfortable with routines and patterns and environments, right? If you're going out of your house, going about it, it's important, it's interesting, maybe you have to do it, or you're going to explore, but you come home at the end at night and you're relaxed and your body relaxes. That's that home base. And if you can say those guys over there are taking away your home base, or those women over there, or those LGBTQ folks over there are taking your home base, you're going to get afraid, and you're going to want someone to basically you're going to give your freedom and independence over to someone who can secure the home and the me and mine. And people maybe not have supported the Death Star, but it happened they believed in the Empire, because that's the thing. The Clone Wars was this massive change, massive instability, and they said, okay, Palpatine, we're happy for you to, the Jedi failed. In fact, Palpatine, you're saying the Jedi are guilty of this. I mean, even Mask of Fear with that fabricated message is just a small example of that. But of the whole calling the Jedi and traitors and enemy of the Republic and all that. Palpatine saying, okay, I will make the galaxy great again. I will reorganize the Republic into the First Galactic Empire for a safe and secure society. And the ultimate safeguard of that safe and secure society is this giant super laser that can destroy a planet, but only use it on planets that are disrupting your safety and security. So Alderaan, these Zon Vong, or these Alderaanian terrorists, right? So yeah.
I mean, right. So I think people do like their freedom. I also think that if you I actually don't think democracy necessarily means parliamentary republics or even just parliamentary systems. Quite frankly,
No.
I think that's a very Western idea. I think it's a very limited idea what democracy actually
As in
is.
representative legislatures.
I mean, I think as we see them in the West, in Western capitalist bourgeois societies, I think we can have a bit. I think there are more interesting ideas out there if you go look for them. I'm not saying necessarily like, and I'm not even saying like, oh, the medieval kingdoms were democratic. But granted, I also think that as long as the farmer wasn't dealing with the sheriff and getting taxed, like I don't think.
I mean, he was getting taxed. That's the feudalism, but I mean, my point is to say, what was I thinking about this? Was I talking about this the other day? I forget where I was talking about this. We thought progress was linear. We thought that, we've moved past this sort of all these rampant violations of due process and all people having rights, not just citizens, and all that. We thought we were past this. The only reason we thought we were past it is because we thought it was possibly past it. I'm not trying to be a downer here. I'm trying to say, maybe I'm trying to say, Joel, you're right. We've always been this way. This isn't new. And it's just maybe new to our time and our generation to some extent. It's a shock after, Obama, who wasn't that progressive, but, at least,
I lived through the Bush years, so I've already dealt with this once.
So did I, and, I lived through the Stephen Harper years, and that's the thing is, it is to say, it can come around again. We need to be diligent, and one of the things I think maybe this is the point. One of the things that we weren't diligent about is taking our freedom for granted, and that believing that freedom meant I can just do whatever I want with whatever I want. And this is the fascinating thing is we're seeing, it's Pride Month, and we're seeing in society, I think, a shift from saying pride and freedom means I have the choice over my own identity to no, I'm seeing the truth for what it is. For people who experience gender dysphoria, transitioning, they would say is demonstrating the truth for what it is. This goes for, I mean, to touch on the hotline, the third rail issues, right? How the pro-choice movement, their main argument, it can't be, and I think Kamala Harris got into this. This is part of what she got into. Her argument was, this is massive tangents, but maybe we'll bring it back to the Death Star somehow. I promise. Yeah. That the main argument was, I get to do whatever I want with my body, and not I'm the one responsible for what my body and what my life is meant to be about. Also, they're saying ectopic pregnancies, right? Where was that argument before? Finally, they're saying, there was a Florida representative. I just saw on Blue Sky or something. How there's a Republican representative who was surprised that she wasn't given adequate medical care, or maybe she was, but the doctors were hesitant to do it because of the such extreme abortion bans. But the reason they brought on the extreme abortion bans is because there's this. I mean, I should be careful here, but one of the things that led to Dobbs, I think, was a reticence to point out the dangers of restricting medical treatment for care for ectopic pregnancies. Was all the situations of poverty and injustice that lead to abortions, right? I mean, that's another big thing, right? Is let's actually make abortions undesirable. Why not do that by supporting these families and these mothers and adoption systems and all that? Um, we forgot that freedom primarily means, this is my point, that, don't cancel me, anybody. Freedom can't just be freedom from, it has to be freedom for. And if all we have is freedom from, then we're gonna find that the norm, and we're gonna give away our freedom to the loudest voice, claiming to protect us from the people who are taking away our freedoms, who he claims are taking away our freedoms, and the most powerful voices, if that makes any sense. And so we build these Death Stars to protect us from the freedom from oppression, and it becomes the instrument of repression. Whereas the Rebel Alliance, the Republic maybe failed at this too. The Rebel Alliance and the Jedi, or the Jedi and the Republic maybe failed this. The Jedi needed, and the Rebellion needed, to develop a sense of what the galaxy is meant to be for, what freedom is meant to be for. Mon Mothma and them were thrown back on their principles and had to say, we're actually have to develop a new society, a new system of government that will not make a Death Star, maybe not even have a standing army unless we really need it, but not a standing army. It's an emergency force to go to Jakku. So yeah, it definitely encompasses this theme of the Death Star. Yeah, because it encompasses the way, I mean, it's not just negative liberty, but it's this obsession with negative liberty that capitalism really thrives on, as opposed to building community and diversity. But diversity is only diversity if you're encountering people who are different than you. And if you're just sitting by yourself and being yourself alone, that's not diversity. If you're only with like-minded folks, now yes, there's importance for safe spaces, but safe spaces are only an intermediate step towards diversity. Diversity means you encounter everyone equally, different people equally, and that's the hope. That's where we're trying to get to. But again, it takes effort, it takes diligence, it takes being mindful of what is our purpose, why do we exist, and in order to not let something like a Death Star take it away.
Right. I guess we can the final part I'll bring up is the Death Star destruction. Just the Death Star's destruction.
Yes.
And I've always wondered, in kind of like the back of my head, I love coming up with like what if scenarios of like, okay, if Palpatine died, but before the destruction of the first Death Star, what happens? Because Palpatine died at the end of the second Death Star destruction. And by that time, the Empire's leadership, its morale, its military have just been so broken. And obviously, Operation Cinder doesn't help. But let's pretend Operation Cinder doesn't exist for like a hot second.
Yeah.
You lose Vader, you lose the Emperor, you lose a lot of the great, the most competent leaders. I was talking about this with Andor, where it's like, damn, that 1 week where it's like you lose your party gases, you lose Krennic, you're gonna lose Tarkin and Yularen and the Joint Chiefs in like a couple of weeks. It's that consolidation, putting again everything in the target. All the bigwigs of the Empire are in one place, and you just kill off everybody. Like that hollows out the system. Because I kind of have this like secret hot take where it's like, I don't necessarily believe in great man theory too much, but I do kind of think that we need to take into account the individuals who make up the systems and who create these systems of government to some extent, who found them, especially like their founders, and like why certain regimes can last whereas others can't. Like, even in France, where Charles de Gaulle created the Fifth Republic, which is the republic France is still on, its constitution. like he made that system for himself, but it's still around. Like they didn't, like the regime didn't massively change that
Right.
much. I mean, it kind of evolved, but
Yeah, it's still the Fifth Republic.
you know,
Yeah.
well, we'll see what happens in Iran soon. But like the original Ayatollah died, and after the revolution, and
Mhm.
still here for how long?
Mhm.
Yeah, but other countries like Saddam Hussein's Iraq, that's gone.
Mhm.
Napoleon III's empire that got destroyed. You know, World War II Germany that
Mhm.
got obliterated. Italy got obliterated.
Yeah.
Um, but corporatist Estado Novo Portugal, the original founder died, and it lasted like 6
Mhm.
more years. It could have lasted longer if there wasn't that coup.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, what did Palpatine have to do, or what kind of like is that is the personality of Palpatine, where it's like
Mhm.
if somebody else had established the Empire with a little bit more foresight, I do wonder if you could have had an empire where it's like they would have lasted would have lasted longer than 25 years
Sure.
and could have gone past its original founder. 'Cause in Star Wars, technically, there was an empire called the Pious Day, where you had that lasted 1,000 years. That was a
Mhm.
human supremacist empire that hated aliens and it's a whole legends thing. Very
Yeah.
interesting. So it's sort of like, well, okay. So again, I just look at that. It's like, well, Palpatine's personality put all these chips in this Death Star basket. It gets blown up.
Mhm.
Tarkin, some of the most veteran officers die. That really hollows out the regime.
Mhm.
Then all the battles that happen in the comics that can't help. And then
Sure.
with Endor, you lose Palpatine, the Emperor, and a bunch of high
Vader.
command officials, and Piet and the Executor, and all those cats.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it's the destruction of the Death Star. It's like, of course, the Empire falls even when Palpatine died, because like any sort of alternative to replace him, not that he ever wanted one in the first place, is
Mhm.
gone with him. So it's like,
Yeah.
who are the leadership? I guess Gallius Rex, and then Blaze Ray Sloan.
Sayonara.
True.
Laden in a Star Destroyer. I mean that and Lost Stars explicitly goes into that, right? That with the loss of all these senior officers, with the second Death Star, I mean, she gets promoted to commanding a Star Destroyer when she's in her 20s, right? It's it's a brain drain a little bit. It's I mean, we're seeing that a little bit here with this oligarchy of tech bros, you know.
But I guess my thing is
Mhm.
the Empire didn't just fall because Palpatine died naturally in his sleep and nothing happened.
Right.
I'll say, I don't know, Stalin, where Soviet Union lasted 50 more years.
Mhm.
Other people have argued like even the leaders after Stalin weren't that great, and it's like, well,
Yeah.
but China's still around. China's gone for 89, almost 80
Yeah.
years after the revolution, and Mao has been dead for 30.
Mhm.
So it says the ferocity of that system that he
Mhm.
created.
Yeah.
So it's sort of, but it's like Palpatine just died in his sleep one day because he was an old man. Like he lost 2 Death Stars, and a bunch of the people around him all died in a war. His
Yeah.
military just collapsed, and this
And
is
his
also
former apprentice chucks him over the bridge, the ledge.
yeah, and this is also kind of my.
Mhm.
I'm getting a lot of hot political takes today, guys. I hope
Well,
it's
I
not.
do want to speak on this
Oh, let me
to
let me
this.
let,
Okay, but
let me
I do want to mention. I do want to. I'll put a pin in the great man theory thing, but keep going. Keep going.
this is kind of my this is kind of my World War I. Why did the Romanovs fall? Which I do think
Mhm.
you can blame the Tsar for it, but the Tsar bungled into World War I,
Mhm.
drained his army, demoralized his army, lost a lot of the best officers, and when people were sick of it,
Mhm.
he had no army to defend himself because they were also sick of it. So like, yeah, screw it, we're going against the Tsar, and then Soviets happened.
Mhm.
It's more complicated than that, but
Yeah.
my point is, Palpatine didn't die in his sleep. He died fighting a war, and his military was just broken. And when
Yeah.
the Death Star 2 blew up, it was like that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And then the stormtroopers like, I'm out of here. Forget it.
Mhm.
Surrender or run away or become a warlord.
Yeah.
So yeah, no wonder the Empire fell. He
Mhm.
drove it into the ground. So he drove his own system into the ground
Mhm.
because of its just own egotistical personality.
Right.
There you go. Now you can
The Empire has made a critical error, and our time for attack has come.
exactly.
He's on the thing himself. That's the interesting thing is you have with the great man theory or great woman theory. as the case
Great
is.
person theory.
Great person theory. But speaking about Mon Mothma here, um, you know, if you have the opportunity to either create a system that props you up, or create the opportunity to create a cult of personality, or you have the opportunity to create a robust set of institutions that are bigger than yourself.
Mhm.
And I think with with Mon Mothma, ideally, with the New Republic,
Mhm.
she could have created a cult of personality.
Mhm.
Um, she's nowhere to be seen, and yet the New Republic is still functioning, at least by bloodline.
It lasted longer than the Empire.
That's long as the Empire, at least, right? Um, yet with Palpatine, I mean, he intentionally built a system around himself, right? And so that's what you're getting at, is this cult of personality. Um, you know, that's the thing, and maybe that's an interesting. That's uh, you know, medieval monarchs, whenever if they had a head on their shoulders, literally and otherwise, they had a head on their shoulders, not literally, meaning figuratively. They had a sense that their office was bigger than themselves, and so and by the time of the Middle Ages, I mean, the Magna Carta had developed Parliament to the point where it had real norms, real responsibilities, and real teeth to influence the crown, to the point where, I mean, that's the thing. That's the wild thing now is Charles III does not want political power.
Mhm.
He believes his office. I'm being positive on him, of course. He believes his office is bigger than himself, and bigger than even any kind of royal prerogatives or power. It's about preserving democracy. Oddly enough, that's the big irony, right? Is now his role is to preserve democracy by stepping back and saying, all I do is literally rubber stamp everything. That's it. And so
Yeah.
to have, I mean, that's, I think constitutionally, I mean, that's what's so great about having a head of state without any political power, is that it's just this container on it. And yeah, it's not
I'm
a cult
gonna.
of personality, right? I mean, that's the
Oh,
thing, people, but I mean,
I
we
want
have
to
our
add
own
to that.
cults of personality in the sense of, in pop culture. I mean, I'm a Swiftie. What happens when Taylor retires? I don't know. Is music going to implode? Well, no. I mean, that's the thing. She's also built. Here's an example. This whole Taylor's versions re-recording. She's built a relationship between artists and their labels that goes beyond herself, that is reaping rewards for other folks. And so she's not winning awards anymore. The people who standing on her shoulders are. Um,
Well, I
so
mean,
that's the thing. The cult of personality can go both ways.
it's interesting because, there's always this debate of whether or not the Empire is like fascist in like the actual political sense of the word.
Mm-hmm.
And I have my own controversial thoughts because I think
Mm-hmm.
that the word has been used to almost to a point where it doesn't have meaning, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
kind of developing a very technical, very more narrow
Mm-hmm.
version of what that word actually means and what it should we apply it to. Not saying it's like if you're not that you're better. There's still plenty of
Mm-hmm.
horrible people who aren't technically even that. It's just
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, but I mean, other works like Rise and Fall have tried to give the Empire like a sense of grander ideology, new orderisms.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where the First Order comes in, and they're about the Empire. They don't really care about Palpatine per se. They're kind of his political descendants, but they also don't care. So you can kind of
Mm-hmm.
almost say they're independent of him. But the system of the Empire,
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, you know, whether or not it has an ideology,
Mm-hmm.
the human high supremacy thing or not, I think you could argue that it's so weak sauce in a
Mm-hmm.
sense because it's all about Palpatine at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's all about this guy that his system really begins and ends with him. Where, I think countries that have bigger ideologies, their
Mm-hmm.
systems can last. Say what you will about China. You know,
Mm-hmm.
China, the current government was founded on Marxist communists. They were
Yeah.
true believers in that. You
Mhm.
don't, we don't have to talk about whether we like them or not, but
Mhm.
they're still here. And what have I heard about China? Even when the current dude is no longer with us,
Mhm.
I think people are prematurely talking about the end of China after Mr. Xi's
Mhm.
passing a little prematurely. A little more interested in what
Yeah.
happens post Putin because
Yeah.
is very much made everything
That's a
about
cult of
Russia himself.
personality.
Everything
Yeah.
about himself. Of like,
Yeah.
well, hopefully just find a new guy to take over because there's
Mhm.
no kind of deeper ideology
Mhm.
really. Kind of a weird mix of a bunch of stuff and nothing at the same time. It's
Yeah.
very interesting. So and even I don't think like we're gonna
Mhm.
see the Constitution ripped up or anything like that in America. I do think that the
Mhm.
MAGA movement after
Yeah.
Trump's gone, I'll let you decide what that means. Um,
Mhm.
it's not gonna last that long. I think he's the only guy who can hold it. Once it's gone, it's like I think there's gonna be a
Yeah.
lot of chaos and maybe something new and worse can come about. That's for sure,
Mhm.
like the First Order. But I think like if to use Star Wars again, Palpatinism and the Death Star being destroyed. That's the end of that. The First Order is definitely using the aesthetics of the Empire,
Mhm.
and this is where it gets really interesting. But you can also make the argument that the First Order is a new political tendency, even if it has like former officials who used to work for the Empire. It's its own thing.
I
Um,
mean, yeah, it's trying to kind of ape the Empire, though, trying to be a parody of it. Not a parody of it.
I mean, you
Like,
could ape something, but I still think you consider it its own thing.
yeah, that's true.
Uh,
All that to say, I mean, despite Palpatine wanting to be anonymous, in terms of the inner circle and the fact of him pulling all the strings, yeah, it really depended on him. Yeah, even without Operation Cinder, but the Operation Cinder just is a reminder that he wasn't willing to let it exist without himself, and so yeah, it's interesting. Just again, cults of personality, they're going to happen anyway because celebrity. That's how celebrity works.
mhm.
Um, and now we have these parasocial things. Like again, talk about Taylor Swift. She's a parasocial bestie. you know.
Look up Bonapartism people
Oh yeah.
online. I'm gonna actually since we're talking politics, and I've always had a
Yeah.
bit of a qualm of people don't read; they just
Mm,
want to just talk about Star Wars and stop.
yeah.
That's a whole other rant.
Sure.
I'm gonna recommend something to people out there. Look up the Marxist definition of Bonapartism, my friends.
Mhm.
If you really want to understand what we're talking about, look that up, research it. Very interesting.
Interesting. Yeah. Good
Uh,
times.
so yeah.
Again, the Death Star, but we
The
got
desk,
there. We got
the
all the way.
desk The Death
All over the
Star.
place.
Yeah. It's a symbol of Palpatine's power, and it is one of the most weighty super weapons in Star Wars.
Mm,
Is there? I guess I'll ask you throw this with you one more
mm,
time. Ask you to kind of wrap up. Is there
mhm.
anything like from a narrative story standpoint about Death Star you wanted to bring up? Anything in terms of like
Yeah.
any
I mean,
out
kind
of
of
any?
where we're getting at the beginning.
Yeah.
It is a MacGuffin, sort of. I mean, the plans of the MacGuffin, but also
Mhm.
it's the plot of A New Hope is relatively simple, right?
Oh, very.
But
Yeah.
um, it works once. That's the thing. It works once to establish just how clear this structure, this plot structure should be.
Mhm.
You get onto the start with the second act, and then the third act is the entire attack on the thing.
Mhm.
Um, Again, it's why I wish J.J. Abrams had showed more imagination, especially with Starkiller Base, like Force Awakens. Just what are you doing here? I mean, I should give it another shot, but it's even a trench run. Like, come on. So, um, yeah, I mean, definitely George's genius. I mean, you talk about the Force
Death Star
Awakens.
2's got that problem too.
Yeah, this Return of the Jedi. I mean, that'd be another interesting episode. Just the reception of Return of the Jedi in 1983. Good historical look.
Mm.
Yeah, again, it works really well once, and then you can't really do it again. If you do it again, it's like, oh, come on. So
I think the only other one that I don't have much of a problem with is like the Starforge in Knights of the Old Republic. Although that's
which
more of
from
a,
yeah. So
although I guess it's kind of because the whole thing is you're hunting the Starforge.
mhm.
So kind of like a big scavenger hunt for this ancient weapon that builds ships.
Which is also interesting. I mean, the Starforge does build something though. That's also makes it different. At least
That's
from what
true.
I've heard about the Starforge, it actually does something constructive.
For
So literally
evil, but yeah.
for
Um,
evil, but you could use it for good. I guess this is the whoever the powers that be, the Republic or whatever, try to use it for good eventually. I think.
no, they destroy it.
Oh, they destroy it. Okay, but
Uh, yeah, they destroy that thing.
yeah,
I mean, I guess it's just how it's used compared to the
yeah,
other times where it's like Death Star 2, it's just a location. Death Star 3, needs
mhm,
to blow a planet up, and it's just a location. The
yeah,
fleet kind of see where they're going with it, and at least
yeah,
it's somewhat different, but
yeah,
I would have not to get into like rewriting the movie, but like
mhm,
I would have had Rise of Skywalker be Rey and Kylo on a chase to find a hidden fleet, and then they both meet up with Palpatine, and then he does his thing, and then
yeah.
that's
I
all.
mean, that's the last thing to say maybe about the Death Star is a fleet you can use for exploration, a fleet you can use for scientific discovery, a fleet you can use for relocating people and for defense. There's only one thing a Death Star can do. That's the wild thing. It's such a big monstrosity, but it's the only thing it can do. And so, I mean, you build something like that. That's the thing. There's only thing a nuke can really do. I mean, it's used for deterrence, sure, but um, you build something like a Death Star. You build something like the technology. You're going to find that it's easy to use, right? If it's there,
Right.
right? I mean, that's what the Clone Wars, the Clone Army. Oh, they're there. Might as well use them. No one said, no, we shouldn't be doing this. I'm sure some Qui-Gon would have, but he wasn't around anymore. So, yeah, that's the last thing to say is our relationship to technology. I'm thinking about this because of AI a lot now.
Mm-hmm.
Our relationship to technology is always
Mm-hmm.
two ways. The medium is the message, and the content is the audience. And the technology we create
Mm-hmm.
will create our options for us. And so we just have to be clear about what the technology we're creating is.
You know, just to kind of bring this up again from the future, and this is something I know
Mhm,
people wish the sequel could have been if the New Republic had actually been more of a thing.
mhm,
Um, it would have been interesting if like the good guys had a Death Star
mhm.
and like what that could have meant. I've always heard like people should have said like, oh, it's like New Republic should just been like the Empire for the good guy stormtroopers, good guy fleets.
That's like
Very,
Gray Jedi.
I mean, that's a very It's
Naive.
very liberal kind of the institutions don't matter to the people in charge. And it's like
Right.
sort of like saying, as long as ICE is under the control of Obama and Biden, it's fine. Um, it's just when it's Trump who's using it, it's bad.
Yeah. Just
It's very mentality there, which I don't quite like.
as long as Guantanamo's open.
But Obama's the president.
Exactly. No, but that's the thing. That's why like Obama is not as progressive as we thought. He didn't close Guantanamo. He
Exactly.
used Guantanamo.
One
So
more thing, and then we'll wrap it up.
okay.
Because I'm thinking about this.
Mhm,
One lore thing I've always found interesting about the Death Star, and I remember reading it, and I think like a Rogue One visual dictionary. So who knows?
mhm.
Is that the Death Star is like inspired by ancient Sith weapons, and I'm like, the Death Star is inspired by ancient Sith weapons. What were the ancient Sith weapons like? That sounds terrifying.
I mean, again, I want to know what this Malachor thing is. What's going on there?
My secret kind of wish
Mhm.
is that we find out that the Death Star is like child's play compared to like what the ancient evil used to have. Like
Yeah.
that. I mean, that's my opinion. You go big and go bombastic because at least it's big and bombastic.
Mhm,
Yeah, even if it's like a Death Star times 20 or a bajillion, it's so over the top anyway. It's kind of fun.
mhm.
That's just me.
Yeah, maybe. But again, it would have to be. It would be in danger of being like a Star Killer base thing. It would have to be more complex than that and more interesting than that. Maybe more constructive. Something like the Star Forge. is an interesting concept. So
I hope they
there you
bring that back. But yeah, the
Mhm.
Death Star, impressive turn of phrase.
There we go.
We kind of went all over the place. I
Yeah.
feel a little bad about
No,
that
no.
one.
Again, because there's only so much you can talk about the actual thing, right?
Right.
But it's not the point of it. I mean, we only see it used
Mhm.
twice,
Mhm.
and then it's destroyed, right? The point of it wasn't necessarily its use, is its existence in the first place. So yeah, why? Why does it exist? That's what we were getting at, and everything around it. So, but yeah, it's a great place to wrap things up. Thanks everyone for joining. Let us know what you thought of the conversation. What you think of Trials of the Jedi? Non-spoiler thoughts, please. Younger generations having more different frames of references for what Star Wars is, and why the Death Star exists, and
And
why.
look up Bonapartism, kids.
There we go. Yeah, check, comment down below. Also, please do give this video a like and a share, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Joel, again, thanks for leading us through this conversation, leading us all over this conversation. It's great. It's good. It's how we do things here at the Ion Canon podcast. Where can they find you on the internet?
Yes, the only podcast where we can talk about the Death Star and somehow get into Charlemagne.
Yes, that's us for you.
I want Jedi Charlemagne. I want that for the sequel era.
I mean, Lena So kind of.
It's true.
There's some parallels there. Anyway,
you can find me at JID20234 on Blue Sky, JID20234 on Blue Sky. Of course, you can find me at the Ion Cannon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD, where I post stuff. I've been asking questions of what people think about Trials of the Jedi, non spoilers, of course, and what the future of publishing might be. So be on the lookout for that and more.
yes. There you go. I think the future of publishing, we need a 10-year break from a major publishing initiative. I've come around to that. Anyway, that's
Yes,
all.
I agree.
That's a whole other topic. Yeah, you can find me personally, Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads, any MNEUG 1138, Instagram beaches.foodie. Back to posting stuff there. Check that out. Also, still on the Bird app, NEUG 485, and of course, yes, Iron Cannon on Blue Sky. No tractor beam this week. That's okay. We'll be back next week, but the week after that, we are talking about Canada and Star Wars. It's the eve of Canada Day. We're gonna keep going with these real world parallels, political parallels, social parallels, and talk about Canada and Star Wars. So come back around for that next Monday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. Until Joel, speaking of the Death Star, let's blow this thing and head home.